Okay, welcome everyone. Here again for another episode of Monk Radio. Just going to get set up here. Make sure everything's working. Okay, so we have 62 questions. I'll try to answer as many as I can in an hour. And if you have comments, not questions, but if you have comments, you can leave them at the YouTube page. Like you can't hear me or something like that, I'll be checking there to make sure that there's no issues. If you want to ask questions, you have to get on the list because we've already got many questions, but you should go to radio.sirimangalo.org, and that's the place where you can find the list of questions and a place to add your own. So I thought the first thing we would do, which I mentioned I think last week, is that we would take the 3 refuges and the 5 precepts. So to do that, we will use the page at refuge, refuge.sirimangalo, sirimangalo.org. And there you'll see the ceremony for taking the 5 and the 8 precepts. So we'll just do the 5 today. If I find out there's anybody who wants to do the 8 precepts in the future, we can add them in there. But simplest, I think, is to do the 5 precepts. So for those of you who aren't familiar, probably it's something that you want to study first. If you don't know what this is, probably it's not something you're ready to become interested in. So study it or read up about it and decide for yourself later. For those of you who know what it is, this is a chance for us to formally take refuge in the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, and reaffirm our commitment to the 5 precepts. So we'll do that first as sort of an introduction, kind of a weekly ceremony for us to reaffirm our practice. So we'll start. I want to add something at the beginning, but maybe we'll do that later. I'll add it to this page later. For now, we'll start with it as it's written. You can just repeat after me. I'll say everything and have you repeat after me. You can read the words, and it's if you want the pronunciation guide, it's up in the top right. Oh, it didn't work. Hit the plus sign instead. Scroll up to the top, but then instead of clicking on pronunciation, click on the toggle, that little plus, and it'll come up in the top right. A as in father, O as in go. The letter E is actually pronounced A. Glue, U as in glue, E as in machine. There's no I. That's not correct. I don't know where that comes from. But AY would be A, and then ya or yo or whatever the Y is. Anyway. But it's true, they're separate. The A is always father. The A is always A, not A. Father is A. That would be a long A. I don't know what's wrong here. Anyway, C as a cha is always ja. B as K, PH, KH, T, M. The M with the dot under it is ang, actually, NG. So in the beginning there it's ahang, not aham. TH is t, not th. And with the nya over it is nya. The V is pronounced as a W. Okay, so that's that. Now I'll just have you repeat after me. Ahang bante tisaranena saha pancha silani yachami dutiyampi อะหังพันเตติสรณเนนะสหปัญจศีลานิยาจามิตติยัมปิอะหังพันเตติสรณเนนะสหปัญจศีลานิยาจามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะบุตถังสรณังกัจฉามิธัมมังสรณังกัจฉามิสังฆังสรณังกัจฉามิตุติยัมปิบุตถังสรณังกัจฉามิดุติยัมปิธัมมังสรณังกัจฉามิดุติยัมปิสังฆังสรณังกัจฉามิตติยัมปิบุตถังสรณังกัจฉามิตติยัมปิธัมมังสรณังกัจฉามิตติยัมปิสังฆังสรณังกัจฉามิติสารณกัมมนังนิทิตัง and you say ama bhante ปานาติปาตาเวระมณีสิกขาปดังสมาธิยามิอดินนาดานาเวระมณีสิกขาปดังสมาธิยามิกาเมสุมิจฉาจาราเวระมณีสิกขาปดังสมาธิยามิมุสาวาดาเวระมณีสิกขาปดังสมาธิยามิสุราเมรยะมัญจะปมาดะทานาเวระมณีสิกขาปดังสมาธิยามิอิมานิปัญจสิกขาปดานิสีเลนะสุกติงยันติ Silena bhoga sampada, silena nibbutiyanti, tasma silang visodhaye. And you say sadhu, sadhu. I just bow 3 times, or as it says. Okay, that's our introduction. So for those of you who are not interested, thank you for bearing with us, and now on to the questions and answers. So, here we are, okay. Make sure we're at the top here. All right. Is there anything we can do in this life to guarantee that we will meet the Dhamma again in our next life? Well, simply being close to the Dhamma. Our minds tend, it's not entirely sufficient, but our minds tend towards the sorts of things that we are engaged in. So there's just so many factors that you can never really be sure. But well, what you can be sure is if your mind is not in line with the Dhamma, then it doesn't matter whether you meet with the Dhamma or not. So in fact, it's important to meet with the Dhamma, but it's far more important to be ready to meet with it. And that's, I think, something that is much more under our control than whether we actually meet with the Dhamma. So you can't say what your next life is going to be like. All of the factors are just so hard to predict, and there's so many things involved with the chance of where you're going to be born. But you can affect where your mind is at that time. So in some cases, like in the case of Sumana the gardener, who I talked about in the last Dhammapada video, he met with the Buddha and he listened to the Buddha's teaching, I think. He paid great respect to the Buddha, but the Buddha's prediction was that he would never become enlightened under a Buddha, that eventually he would become enlightened by himself. He would become self-enlightened as a Pacceka Buddha, a private Buddha, sometime in the future. So it's a reminder that it's actually meeting with the Dhamma in the sense of meeting with the passed on teachings is not the most important thing. The most important thing is getting your mind in line with the Dhamma, which most likely will cause you to meet with the Dhamma. It's just not certain. But as I said, what is certain is if you're in a bad place, if your mind is in a bad place, it doesn't matter if you meet with the Dhamma, because you'll never meet with the Dhamma, the truth. The Dhamma is on different levels. There's the teachings, and then there's the truth, which the teachings provide or help one realize. So someone can realize the truth without having been taught. It's much more difficult, of course, but the worst is if your mind is not ready to understand it, then it doesn't matter whether you receive the teachings or not. You'll never become enlightened. So the best we can do is to be ready for the teachings, to purify our minds and have our minds in a good place. Of course, the best we can do is now that we have met with the teachings, is to realize the Dhamma in this life. Obviously, that's the best, and thinking about the next life is a really bad place to focus our attentions. But a side product of that is, first of all, we'll be ready for the teachings, and second of all, provided our mind is involved enough with the teachings and involved with people who are meditating, and so maybe helping out at a meditation center or teaching meditation or helping your other people learn the Dhamma. Like for example, when you teach the Dhamma, you would think that puts you in a position to learn the Dhamma in the future. That if karma is really all that it's cracked up to be, that the best way to receive teachings is to give them. This is, even in this life, you can see the best way to learn something is to teach it. Many people will verify this. So obviously, practicing the Dhamma is the best way, but uh, just remember that the most important thing is to be ready for it rather than to simply meet with it. Though not to put down the chance of meeting with the Dhamma. It's a rare opportunity and it's a wonderful thing that we have. It's just that I would say it's not entirely certain, even if you are a practitioner, because there's just so many variables involved with karma. It's something that we can't really understand and can't really predict unless we're fully enlightened Buddhas. So there you go. Bante, I've heard that it is a good idea for a layperson to keep more than the 5 precepts once a week, such as not sleeping in a high place or luxurious bed. Do you agree? What additional precepts should a layperson keep? Yes, this was actually a practice in the time of the Buddha. People would ask the Buddha what to do on the holy days, because in India at the time there were the full moons, and I believe there were also the half moons. It's not clear in my mind. Anyway, you have these holy days that they had recognized in Hinduism, in the religion that we now know as Hinduism, Brahmanism, or whatever. And so people would ask the Buddha, what do we do on these holy days? How should we Buddhists behave? And so the Buddha said there are many ways of keeping the uposatha, keeping the holidays. But taking the 8 precepts was how the Buddha recommended it. So if that translates in the West to every Sunday, that I think is a fine thing to do. Monks can't do that. We are still traditionally bound to the moons. So every full moon and every empty moon, we have our holidays. But for lay people, I would say, in a world where Saturday and Sunday are the holidays, take one day or the other, and every week keep the 8 precepts. It's a great way to keep up your practice and to intensify your practice, to intensify your commitment and your dedication to Buddhism. They're talking about what's going to make us closer to the Dhamma. Keeping the 8 precepts once a week is an excellent way to bring you closer to the Dhamma. So it's the 8 precepts. You have the 5 precepts, and then instead of just the third one being wrong sexual activity, you engage in no sexual or romantic activity. And then you add 3 more, which are not to eat outside of the morning hours, not to engage in entertainment or beautification, and not to sleep on a high bed, so to try to sleep on the floor, on the simple bedding. So keeping those are the meditator's precepts, and they push you into a meditative state, so they're quite useful and beneficial for a meditator, and a great way to intensify your commitment, just as a Christian or a Jew would or Muslim would every week go to their holy place in order to reaffirm their commitment, remind themselves about the teachings, and so on. Something you can do even at home. With Buddhism, just practice meditation for that day. Like here in Stony Creek, actually, we're going to take Saturdays, I think. So every Saturday, once I get back from Florida, we're going to try to do a meditation course every Saturday. So that'll be all day, 9 to 4. Say everyone can come, and they'll know that every Saturday they have that. Of course, if you don't have a place near you, you just do it at home. Keep the 8 precepts and try to practice as much as you can. Hey, where'd my question go? Yeah, that's the one that should be at the top. Why do some people simply possess brilliant minds, are born geniuses, etc.? Actually, do you think geniuses are born or made? May one of the reasons be their previous life in some of the higher realms? Well, not even necessarily in the higher realms, but some aspiration in the past. Definitely, quality of the mind even inclination for certain things. So people who are inclined towards music, people who are inclined towards science. It's interesting. Last night I went to one of my supporters' houses, and they're meditators, and their two daughters are also meditators. And talking to their two daughters about their university studies and comparing, just chatting about university and about the way we learn. The one daughter is very, very much math oriented, pure math oriented. So she doesn't like practical applications, right? There's these two sides of science studies. One is people who like the pure stuff, where it's just theory, doesn't have any basis in reality because reality is muddy, reality is organic, and there's uncertainty in it, and so on. And then the other side hates that stuff and loves getting the hands-on kind of organic, natural stuff that has uncertainty and is practical. And we were talking about it, and it's quite clear that they're two very, very different people. So science understands that, and they have this left brain, right brain kind of thing, genetics, and the idea that people are different. But from a Buddhist point of view, it's also interesting to see how different how different two daughters can be, two siblings can be, and obviously we see that in people. So we're born differently, and we would attribute this at least partially to past karma. But the idea of the quality of brilliance, like some people have great memory, I have great memory. It just happens to be a trait. And this other monk who ordained after me, but he's been a meditation teacher for quite some time. In our tradition, he has a terrible memory, and yet he's a brilliant teacher, and he's now, I think, world renowned. He's a great guy. He's also on YouTube a little bit. People put his videos on offer. He's in Israel, but terrible memory, and he admits it. So we're comparing this, and it's just interesting how we have different qualities of mind, different abilities, and so definitely we attribute this, and we speculate on the fact that this is probably something to do from the past. Karma really isn't, that's not really the important questions about karma that we ask. The most important questions or knowledge that we try to, understanding we try to cultivate is about karma right here and now, what it's doing to us, how it's changing us. The idea that you might be reborn in a better place, in a better way, is kind of incentive to help you do that, to help you understand. And if people knew what their actions were leading them to, then they'd be a lot more concerned about learning about them, about studying about them. So the important thing is that you come to the present moment and study your karma. But by telling people about past and future lives, it helps them see the importance of doing that. So if there is a future life, and if your karma, your state of mind is going to influence that, then gee, you better come and look and see whether what you're doing is the right thing to do, and learn more about how to do the right things. So it's a lot more basic preliminary stuff to talk about karma in terms of past lives, future lives, and so on. The ultimate goal is to understand karma as it works here and now, how our bad deeds are making us bad people, are corrupting our minds, and how our good deeds are purifying our minds, are making us calmer, more peaceful, more gentle and beneficial beings. But yeah, so definitely plays a part, something to well, not really something to think about, but there you have it. Definitely karma is most likely to play a part. It seems reasonable to say that, and that's the Buddhist theory, is that past lives do determine a lot of, or do condition our lives in the present, and present will condition the future. What causes a person to have a pleasant or painful experience? According to the Buddha, if we hold the view that it is all caused by what we have done in the past, or it is being done by a god, it is considered wrong view. What is the right view? Yeah, it's a tough one because definitely a lot of it is the past. But karma is both past and present. So it's the point is it's not all karma, you see, because there's what you've done, and then there's the circumstances, the people around you. So you have past karma that you've done, and that's caused people to hate you, say. So there's people who hate you, and therefore they're causing you to suffer. But the fact that they're perpetuating it in the present is a part of that. So they can still choose to follow their hatred or to acknowledge it, be mindful, let go of it. And so, as an example, this is a part of the cause for you to feel pain in that case. So, and if people love you, that's your past karma, the good things that you've done, but they may hold out, or things may happen in their lives that change the way they behave, the way they perceive you, and so on, and that affects whether you experience pleasure or pain from them. So karma is not everything. That's what the Buddha said. And so there was someone who held this view that karma was everything, and then it's like, well, past karma is everything. I was like, well, then it's not possible to change. It's not possible to become enlightened, or it's not reasonable to practice. There's no point in practicing. So it's a bad view to hold. I mean, one way of looking at it is the idea of what's true and what's not true isn't the most important thing. The most important thing is what is useful, what is practical. So even if it's hard to get your mind around, but think of it like this: even if it were true that we had no free will and it was all determined by the past, say, which the Buddha denied, but suppose that were the case, it still would be a bad idea to hold such a view. It's ironic, you see, and so if anyone who held that view would be in trouble, because they would be disinclined to better themselves. And so that such a person would be more likely to suffer than a person who held the view that we can change, that we can benefit ourselves. So you see, reality according to Buddhism is a bit of a slippery thing, I would say, because we don't go that step of creating theories. I've talked about this before. The idea of free will determinism, it takes an assumption of a underlying universe outside of our experience, which uh, can support the idea of a being who has free will, or a being who is deterministic, or physical realities, or physical entities, quantums, that are deterministic. So since Buddhism doesn't go for that, we're better able to appreciate and to deal with reality, how to act. So, because a person who's deterministic can't say, well, I'm going to better myself, because they're not really going to better themselves. And they may better themselves, but they'll do so thinking that it's deterministic. And I think definitely there's a danger for these people to become complacent and to be less inclined to better themselves, more inclined to, I mean, there's something good about it, because more inclined to accept their faults, so less inclined to blame themselves. So there's something there. Person who believes in free will has similar problems. They tend to blame themselves, to hate themselves, to feel frustrated when they can't change certain things. But this is why Buddhism does away with both of those. So what causes, to directly answer your question in brief, what causes a person to have these experiences? Well, yes, so karma is a big part of it, but a lot of it is past karma, and a lot of it is present karma. But it seems like there's also some vaguely defined processes, like the natural physical processes, maybe even you could say quantum processes, maybe even random elements. I don't know if that's even valid, but the point is not everything is karma. What you can say is a lot of it is karma, past karma, and a lot of it is present karma. So that's where we should watch out, because obviously the rest of it is out of our control. We should cultivate those actions that are actually going to benefit us in the present, and be forgiving of our own past and of the pasts of others. So be forgiving of the past and being able to let go and bear with the results of our bad past karma. So not to become upset when bad things happen to us. We should understand that there's various factors that we have to take into account. Those we can affect and those we cannot change. I think that's proper. Just going to take a sip. This is my water jug. That's now on YouTube. No, I'm not going to record that. Okay, I'm just going to take a moment here to go and see the comments, just in case there's something important. Who is that in the background? That's one of my teacher's teachers. He's a monk. Passed away. Passed away in the 80s, I think, or early 90s, I can't remember. Great monk. He's got lots of talks. He gave many, many talks, and they've got them all recorded, all in Thai. But he's been a great source of knowledge and inspiration for me. Bante, I'm considering ordaining, so what would you advise? To ordain in UK, for example, or to go to Thailand? I know enough English to be comfortable with speaking and understanding it, but I don't know Thai, thanks. Well, I guess the only place I can advise to ordain in Thailand that still works is Wat Banana Chat, which is also the most well-known place to ordain. It's in the northeast. It's under the Ajahn Chah group. And I sent someone there, for those of you who have been asking about Samanera Mogaraja. He went to Thailand and they changed his name because no one likes that name except me. And probably Mogaraja, the original guy. His parents, anyway. And they ordained him. He's ordained. He ordained, but now he's disrobed again, and we had to help him fly back home because he gave up and wants to go back to university. Yeah, so, but I think he didn't ordain at Wat Banana Chat, but they sent him somewhere else where he could ordain, and it worked. So, as I understand, it still works in their group. Otherwise, Thailand's a very difficult place to ordain. Sometimes they just pull your lead you along and then don't ordain you. It can be tough for foreigners. It's difficult to ordain as a foreigner in Thailand. So ordaining in the UK is another great idea. We need more monks in the West, and it's something that we should be willing to undertake. But it's not easy. I think a new monk living in the UK, depending where you are, if you're ordaining in a city, I think that would be very difficult. Ordaining up at Amaravati might be a lot easier. Jidhurst, I think, is the other one. There's two places. I'm not sure, but it's all in the Ajahn Chah tradition. Probably your best bet if you're looking to ordain. Hello, Bante. Buddhism is a religion that is made to make one individual the path to enlightenment. How can it be that you don't hear about Buddhists that become enlightened, Arahat, or a Buddha? Thanks. Well, you're not talking to the right people, I guess. There's a lot of people out there who do talk about people becoming enlightened, Arahants, or Buddha. But I imagine in Israel you wouldn't hear so much. But the other thing, I mean, the obvious answer here is that people don't talk about it. An enlightened being is incredibly disinclined to talk about their own enlightenment. Even a Sotapanna is someone who has just begun on the path to enlightenment has given up that idea, and is incredibly disinclined towards bragging or announcing their enlightenment. So even Buddhists don't hear about it, and we generally speculate about our teachers and so on. And often that speculation goes overboard, and suddenly everybody's an arahat, everybody's enlightened. The reason you don't hear about people becoming Buddhas is because it's apparently not possible at this point. I think it would be impossible for two reasons. One is that the Buddha Sasana is still here, and two, so the world is not currently capable of supporting a private Buddha, a Pacceka Buddha, and two, a perfectly enlightened Buddha could not arise in this age. This is theory. I mean, it may all be wrong. I think it's just what the commentaries say, but the theory is that there's too many defilements, and their lifespan is too short at this point for a Buddha to arise. A Buddha would not arise at this time. The other thing is, first of all, we have a prophecy of when the next Buddha is coming, and we have an understanding that it's a very rare thing for a Buddha to arise. So the chances, even without that prophecy, of a Buddha arising in this day and age or any time soon, is very, very rare because we just had one. And there's some kind of gravity involved, I would say. I would speculate that anybody who was even close to becoming a Buddha had to have been drawn towards this Buddha. Like Mahakachayana, I think. Mahakachayana, I think, if I remember, or it was Kassapa, one or the other, was destined to become a Buddha, had made a determination to become a Buddha, and gave it up. I can't remember which one it was. See? Bad teacher. Don't know my stuff. But one of them. And they gave it up when they met the Buddha, because they realized that it was much better for them to become enlightened here and now and pass on the teachings, help spread the teachings here and now. There's that one. Why did it move down? What is the cure for complacency in practice? Good question. Urgency, the sense of urgency. Association, it's always about association with people who have a sense of urgency. When you're alone, it's very easy to become complacent, and not only complacent, but somehow resigned, because practice is difficult, and without support, without mutual interactive support, it's easy to get weighed down, bogged down by the sensual world and people who are disinclined to practice. You start to say, well, they're not practicing. At least I'm as good as everybody else, or so on. So that's the biggest thing, is association with good people. Part of that can be listening to talks or reading books, studying, getting teachings that are inclined. A big one is to practice those meditations, but here meditation just in the sense of reflections, recollections of death, of the three characteristics: impermanent, suffering, and non-self, in a conventional or conceptual context, like the idea that everything is impermanent and all of these things that we're clinging to are going to have to change, and so on. The realization that nothing is stable and that at any moment we could be subject to great suffering from any number of causes: sickness, accident, even natural disasters, human-made disasters, accidents, all sorts of things, robberies, crime, punishment, anything could happen. And so thinking about these sorts of things, meditating on them, meditating on the inevitability of death, meditating on even, say, the repulsiveness of the body, meditating on the nature of the body parts as being not as desirable as we think they are, allows us to cultivate a sense of urgency and the need for practice. So there's You can read up about it. I would read the Visuddhimagga, the parts about these various meditations, and reading about that helps to cultivate a sense of urgency. But yeah, the biggest thing is to find a meditation center, do a meditation course, stay with a teacher, hang out with monks and meditators, meditation teachers, and do the best you can. I mean, you're not going to be the perfect meditator where you're always gung-ho on the practice, and sometimes you're going to be down about it. So try your best to do as best you to cultivate as much impetus to practice as you can, and do what you can. Some help there, but ultimately, in the end, it's a hard and twisted and sometimes roundabout route. So effort will come the more you practice, and will come in time. I think we often, it's true of many people, very easy to become complacent, and so all of us worth considering the means of becoming more energetic and more inclined and invigorated towards practice. Our teacher, Ajahn Tong, he was asked this. I was sitting there and I was translating, and someone said, how do I do this? And he said, well, you just think like in the world. If you're in a worldly context, if you don't work hard, then you don't get paid. You don't. You can't succeed in the world if you don't work hard. How could it be any different in the practice? The problem is that people think of the Dhamma as being some kind of hobby or some kind of side activity, something that we do on the weekends maybe. And so by not taking it seriously, of course, it's just like a worldly pursuit. If you don't cultivate it, if you don't work hard at it, you can't hope to succeed. So reflections like that are, I think, quite helpful. That was his advice. Yeah, not interested. Sorry. We just had this question. It's in a different wording. I think maybe even by the same person. Okay, simple question here. Hello, Bante. Which meditation method do you recommend the most? From which sutta is this? Thanks. Very easy question with a very simple answer. The practice that I recommend the most, almost exclusively, is the practice of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, which is found in 3 general places. I mean, other places as well, but most explicitly in the Digha Nikaya number 10. No, Digha Nikaya, no, that's Majjhima Nikaya number 10. Digha Nikaya number, I want to say 12, but I can't remember. It's a shameful thing that I can't even remember. No, it's not 12. Where's the Mahasatipatthana Sutta? 16 is Parinibbana Sutta. Oh, I'm terrible. Don't even remember. 22, is that it? I can't remember what number it is. My mind is going. And here I was bragging about having a good memory. Anyway, I remember what the sutta is all about. Why am I getting those mixed up, no? Anyway, Majjhima Nikaya number 10. And the third place is in the Samyutta Nikaya, the Satipatthana Samyutta. The group, a whole group of discourses based on the Satipatthana Sutta, based on the 4 Satipatthanas, the 4 foundations of mindfulness. And these are the body, the feelings, the mind, and Dhammas, which are... I asked my teacher about the Dhammas recently, because he was still using the English. It's one of the few English words that he knows is the translation of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, and the translation they've given him is the usual mind objects, which doesn't at all encompass what is meant by it in this context. Dhamma as a mind object is only um, Dhamma Ramana, the objects of thought. So the sixth sense, which is thinking. So when you think about something, the object of your thought, that's a mind object. That's called Dhamma Ramana. But the Dhammas here are, my teacher said, things that support you, uh, things that support you, that keep you from falling into evil. Because Dhamma comes from dar, which is to hold. Dharmas are those things that hold you up, keep you from falling. So these are the things that, another way to translate it is those things that exist in reality. So realities is a good translation. Anyway, fourth one has, the problem is it has many groups in it, and it looks to me very much like it's simply talking about teachings, the various aspects of the Buddha's teaching, things that are important, dharmas in the sense of things that will carry you through to enlightenment, teachings that will carry you through to enlightenment. Anyway, that's the teaching, the four foundations of mindfulness. There's an excellent book out there that everyone should read called The Way of Mindfulness, and it's simply a translation of the Mahasatipatthana Sutta with a translation of most, I think, or some at least, of the commentary to the Satipatthana Sutta, and even some of the sub-commentary. So it's an excellent look at how the ancient teachers, 2,000 years ago, 1,500 to 2,000 years ago, were teaching and were interpreting the Satipatthana Sutta. It's an excellent book, excellent resource. It's got lots of neat stories in it and insights in it. But even the sutta itself is a great place to start to learn about meditation. So very, very much worth reading. I mean, on the other hand, it may not be a perfect place to start because, of course, the suttas they're coming from a whole other era, designed for a whole other audience in India, so it's sometimes difficult, and then they're in a whole other language, completely different from English. So sometimes difficult to really understand what's being said. So, but if you take what I'm passing along in tandem with that study, I think it would be indispensable. Those two things together. I'm not bragging about my own teaching, but we're talking about the teaching that has been passed on to me. You take that teaching, and it's basically an explanation in modern terms of the Satipatthana Sutta. Take those two together. In this tradition, that is indispensable. Of course, every tradition has its own explanations, but in this tradition, I would say that's where I get it from. So if you're looking for something, some sort of source, go there and really take these two things together, the teachings that are modern and the teachings that they come from, the Satipatthana Sutta. And also read the Samyutta, the Satipatthana Samyutta. It's an excellent sort of additional resource, something very much worth reading. Favorite Western philosopher thinker. I'm not going to do a question on that. I've kind of got a policy not to answer questions that are outside of the fold of what we're talking about. But I can answer it without. I can try to answer it. It's not something I've thought of. I won't make a video of this though. Who's your favorite Western philosopher thinker? I don't know that I have one. I don't know if I like any of them. Maybe Plato. I don't know. He was kind of cool. Bit weird at times. Trying to think. Dostoevsky was, but he wasn't really a thinker. Some of the things he wrote were quite apt. Maybe not even so. Modern, no. Favorite Western. Trying to think of some of the books I've read. I mean, I don't really, I'm very selective in my own studies, and that's very much Thai Buddhism, mostly Thai Buddhism. But even not even Thai Buddhism, it's this group of Thai Buddhists who passed on, not just Thai Buddhism, but also the Mahasi Sayadaw, which is Burmese Buddhism. But beyond that, it's not like I'm reading Schopenhauer or Nietzsche or any of that stuff. Couldn't really get into it. I've tried from time to time. I was looking at, I don't know. I've delved into it, but every time I try, it's quite off-putting. Not really my cup of tea. So, sorry. Probably not a satisfactory answer. But that's it. While sitting, the effort to come back to the abdomen eventually ruins my vigilance and concentration, whereas following experiences mindfully as they naturally unfold helps me remain mindful. Isn't it contrary to the teachings? What should I do? No, it's not contrary to the teachings necessarily. Now, again, you have to be honest with yourself, which we often aren't, I'm sorry to say. When when the problem is actually bringing the mind back, or when the problem is simply the suffering that you have in the mind and the disinclination to deal with it. So sometimes when we come back to the present moment, when we come back to the here and now, it's unpleasant because our mind is inclined to go with it, to enjoy things and to be fluid and to just let the mind go let the mind go chase after objects, which is disrupted by the practice of mindfulness. So there's two aspects. When you force your mind back to the stomach, that's wrong because it's not being honest with yourself about the nature of reality. You're deluding yourself about the idea that you have some kind of control and can benefit from trying to force things. But by letting your mind go and just following after whatever comes up, then you incline instead towards laziness and indulgence. There's the potential to indulge and to enjoy experiences and give rise to liking and attachment. So one experience that comes up is not it's not ruining your vigilance, but it's going to ruin your sense of enjoyment, which we call concentration. So it's quite common for people to say, this practice is ruining my concentration. It's designed to do that because your concentration is not necessarily wholesome, you see. You can be concentrated on a bad thing. Angry people can be, maybe not from an Abhidhamma point of view, but can be in some way very, very much focused. You can be very much focused on sensual desire. You get caught up in watching a movie or listening to a song, and you can become very much entranced by it in a bad way. You see, because there's a whole bunch of sensual of defilement in there, and so by breaking that up, it's unpleasant, and it's like crying like a child. When the child gets what it wants, it's totally at peace and it's totally focused. When you take its toy away from it, it starts to whine and complain, and so that's essentially what the mind does when you bring it back to the present moment. It whines and complains. So I would say oftentimes you're not actually forcing the mind back, you're just choosing something neutral, which the mind doesn't like. The mind doesn't want to come back to the stomach. That's boring, that's useless, that's uninteresting. And that's the point. The point is to keep you on something that's not going to intoxicate you, which the mind doesn't like. So the mind is like, I much more prefer to go after these interesting things and enjoyable things. And that's mostly what you're feeling. Now, if and when you're actually forcing them, that's not you, but that's mostly what people feel, and I'd imagine in much of what you're feeling is that. That's my guess. But there are people who force themselves. So when something comes up, they ignore it and instead go back, force themselves to stay with one object. So that's not good. When something does come up, you're to acknowledge it. Now, once you've acknowledged it, best advice is to go back to the rising and falling without paying attention to what's going to come next. It will be uncomfortable to do that in many cases because the mind isn't interested in the rising and falling. The mind wants to chase after more enjoyable things, which is not beneficial, which is a problem because it encourages defilement and delusion and the idea of permanence, of stability, and so on, which we're all all of which we're trying to overcome. Should I always be tolerant? Hi, Bante. I am a Buddhist starter. The renovate worker next to my room works until midnight every day and plays loud music. I talked to them many times, but they didn't listen. Should Buddhists be always tolerant? I mean, it's not really the most important thing to ask, should Buddhists always be tolerant? Obviously, that's what most people would ask. But just to point out that let's approach this from the point of view of what's really going to benefit me. I mean, obviously, this isn't benefiting you. Talking to them, being intolerant. And I would say anybody who wants to be happy should be tolerant, because intolerance, and there's going to be a proviso on here, there's a qualifier here, but for the most, in general, tolerance is always going to make you happier. It's always going to bring you more peace than intolerance. Now, there's a point where intolerance becomes delusion, where it actually is the covering up of your inclination to change things. So there's many cases of that. Tolerance of your own faults, tolerance of evil, in the sense of condoning it. You know, when you have a chance to help someone, to even just to advise someone. So you see someone doing something that's going to cause them suffering, and right away there should be the inclination in a good person to help them, to want to help them to see and help them to become better people. But by quashing that and by tolerating their evil, at times, at least when it's your place to say something, like if it's your children, parents who indulge their children and allow them to do whatever they want, or let them explore, that's fine. If they want to do drugs or whatever, let them explore. If they want to get drunk and so on and so on. Of course, there are times where you can't control other people, but there are times where you would just just let it go, and it's not even letting it go, because there is the inclination to help. In a clear mind, there will be the natural inclination to do something about it. It's the correct thing to do, the correct response. And by quashing that, which many people I think confuse with true Buddhist practice, they say, well, you should just let it go, but you're not really letting it go, because there's the inclination. The default is the inclination to help, the inclination to engage, which is natural. Human beings are engaged with each other. We're a part of the universe. To be detached is not really Buddhist. We're part of the process. There is an engagement there, which I think is quite crucial, and many Buddhists don't realize. That's not what you're asking. Obviously, it's not your place to help these people overcome their music addiction. If you were the landlord, it would be your place to tell them to quiet down for the neighbors, for example. But certainly loud music should not bother your sleeping, should not bother your life. This is something that absolutely you should meditate on and cultivate tolerance and equanimity, and understand that it's just sound. Obviously, we're conditioned against that in the West, in Europe, in Canada, in Europe and North America. We're conditioned to expect things from other people. We're conditioned to expect quiet and so on. If you go to Thailand, it's quite an eye-opener, and it's humbling, because the things they tolerate there, it's amazing. In our monastery, there would be 2 weeks out of every year, 2 solid weeks, where basically 24/7 they would have music blaring into the monastery, like really loudspeakers up on a stage. I don't, maybe not during the day. Yeah, I think it was basically 24/7, like really 24 hours a day, loud music. And I can't remember, it may stop somewhere in the early morning and pick up in the morning, but it just seemed like impossible. How could you possibly meditate through this? But Thai people were unfazed by it, and so they'd meditate. It's like it's not really a problem, or they were less fazed by it. And in general, the amount of noise that people in Asia put up with. So it really is just a problem of the highly developed and privileged world, the imperial world, the people who went and conquered the rest of the world and got really rich off of it, because we expect something that is unreasonable. We expect to be treated like royalty, so we expect others to respect us. I mean, this is not obviously what you're going through your mind, but it's ingrained in us. So we have these expectations that well, if nothing else, are harmful, are causing us suffering. Without your expectations, it's probably a lot easier to bear people around you blaring their loud music. And so I would work very much on your expectations and on your views, and come to see that it's really just a cultural thing, where we require things from other people, like quiet and civility, and we expect them to we expect, as the Buddha said, speech at the right time, speech that is polite. We expect speech that is truthful, speech that is beneficial. But he said, you're always going to have speech that is unbeneficial, speech that is harmful, and so on. You're always going to have things that disappoint you. So it's like, I think Milarepa was the one who said, if the whole earth was covered in glass, broken glass, you have two choices. One, you can cover the whole world with leather, or two, you can wear sandals. And where the metaphor kind of breaks down, because we're not trying to cover up the problem, but we're trying to change ourselves. It's clear what he's saying is, you got two choices: change the world, make the world so it's always as you would have it, or change yourself so that you can deal with it. Because in the end, I mean, think of what some people in the world deal with. There are people in the world who deal with starvation, who deal with the constant threat to their very survival from military or corruption or disease or famine. And so it's quite clear that we're just dealing with our own expectations that are actually unreasonable. If we, and the point being that any of these things can come to us at any time. So if you're always expecting something from the world around you, you're always vulnerable. The only way to be invincible is to have no faults, to have no hooks where if this then that, if this comes then I react. So to where you no longer react to the vicissitudes of life. How are we doing? I think we've got time for one more question. Maybe two more questions. Let's go back to the comments. Oh, lots of comments. Surely everything is karma. No, the Buddha said everything is not karma. I got in trouble with that a long time ago. I said the same thing. And a monk got really, this British monk got very, very angry at me. I think it's the Sona Sutta where he says this. It's Sona, if I remember correctly, is the guy who says this, and the Buddha says, no, 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 no. He says, not true. Everything in the present moment is a conditional factor created from our past moments or lives. I think that's, no, I think not. I think that's incorrect to say. So again, if you have questions, you're doing it in the wrong place. I'm not answering questions here from YouTube. I'm answering questions from radio.sirimangalo.org, and you should go there to line up, get your questions in line, and if it's really good, people will upvote it, and the most upvoted questions will be answered first. So it's quite democratic. It is the best way I've found to organize people's questions. It gives me an excuse to ignore other questions because there's too many. I get questions from all over. Okay, I'm not doing one on ayahuasca because I've done them before, but it's also outside of our practice. And no, it's not useful in the meditation practice. Look up my videos on drugs. One announcement, for those of you who haven't heard, I'm going to probably make a video soon about this, just to announce it, is that many of my videos have now been archived and categorized at video.sirimangalo.org. If you go to that site, you'll see them categorized, and people have been helping me categorize them. And so they're not all there yet, but there's over 300 already categorized. And so if you go there and you're looking for a particular topic, or at least you can see topics that maybe you didn't think I'd talked about. So this one about ayahuasca, I think I've actually talked about it a little bit. So you can look under drugs there, drugs and alcohol, there's a category. Go there and see if your question has already been answered. Because actually a lot of these I'm answering even now some of them have already been answered, but I'm kind of just re-answering them. Anyway, this is a good one, I think. It's a little bit tough for me, but I'm not going to back down from a tough question. How did you come to terms with the idea of reincarnation, along with the idea that one goes to Nibbana after death being a reality only if you're enlightened? I don't quite understand. I think the grammar is not quite correct there. Okay, so there's the idea that reincarnation and the idea that one goes to Nibbana after death are only realizable if you're enlightened. Like you can only know these things if you're enlightened. So Nibbana is only something you can know if you're enlightened. As a monk, I think that's what he's saying here, he or she, he. As a monk, did you just decide to accept Nibbana and reincarnation without any evidence? Evidence. Well, there's lots of evidence for reincarnation or rebirth, first of all. But I mean, I can't talk about myself and where I am at, whether I'm, this or that. But there are different levels. Even someone who hasn't seen Nibbana can have great faith, but it still has to be faith. But they can have great faith based on the people that they look up to. So, for example, my teacher, it's the kind of thing where many people have lots of faith in him, even though they haven't become enlightened. They haven't really seen Nibbana for themselves. And that's simply because he's unlike anybody else. He's got something that other people don't have, and people can feel it. Usually it's hard, if they haven't practiced meditation, it's hard for them to see it, but they get the idea that something's there. And they know that an ordinary person is not like this. Is not as kind, as generous, as pure, as unflappable, as constant and steady, and imperturbable as this. And so there's great faith there. People who read the Buddha's teachings, simply reading the Tipitaka, gives you an incredible sense of awe and inspiration and confidence in whoever it was who taught these things. Of course, obviously much more so if you've actually practiced and realized them for yourselves, but even without having done that, people become amazed when they see just how profound. I mean, this isn't like, the Buddha's teaching is nothing like the Bible, for example. It's nothing like the Christian Bible, nothing like it. They have very little in common, these two books. for example, or take the Quran. Very unsimilar. These I guess you'd have a better time comparing them to the Upanishads, for example. And they are in some ways similar to the Upanishads. But even the Upanishads, there is something different with Buddhism. It's much more, what we would say, much sharper, much more mundane even, in the sense of simply dealing with the building blocks of reality. It doesn't have anything superfluous. It's not flowery. It's not designed to enchant you. It's designed to wake you up. And so by reading this, many people get faith. And I think that really just answers your question, because we accept reincarnation with lots of evidence, but we also accept, sorry, but that's about Nibbana. I can say something else about reincarnation, but we accept Nibbana on these grounds. We accept that even though individually we may not have become enlightened, we accept that there's something special about this path. And so that leads us on. Now, ideally, that leads us on until we practice, and once we practice, then we see Nibbana for ourselves. And so it's kind of like when you're walking through the forest and someone comes along who seems to know where they're going, and you watch them and you see that they know, they can point out things, and they know how to avoid beasts and how to avoid pitfalls. So you say, wow, this person really knows this forest. Probably they're someone who could take me out of it. So you trust them. And it doesn't mean you have blind faith in them and say, okay, well, I'm just going to sit here because I'm happy now. I found someone who knows this forest and can find the way out, so now I can rest in peace. Obviously, they don't do that. I mean, that's sort of the picture that you're painting, or many people paint with still blind faith and so on. Well, that's blind faith. It's just sitting around and saying, well, he'll save us. I'll just sit here until he gets me out of here. But that's not what you do. A person who believes in this person, they follow them, or they follow the path that this person points out and find the way out for themselves. They're hedging their bets because this person seems to be. I mean, it's like that with anyone. When you choose a teacher, you can only go by seems to be. Until you know the person very, very well, you just go by what you can see and what you believe, and it can be wrong. But that's where we get the faith in there. But reincarnation, rebirth is actually different, because in the first place, there is much evidence, not proof, but evidence. Remember, there's a difference. There's lots of evidence. There's no proof unless you remember a past life. But even then, you're not really proving anything, because of course it can just be a fake memory. But the evidence of people pointing things out about their past lives, telling, oh, this was mine, and I know that, and I know this person, and calling people by their names and things that they could never know. There's cases of that, anecdotal cases still, but clinical cases. So there's lots of well-documented cases. And second of all, reincarnation is something that comes, I've talked about this before, it's death that requires faith. And so we can actually turn the tables on people who say this sort of thing and say, well, what we know is cause and effect. We know that our experience now and how we react to it and interact with it affects the experience in the future. We know that that's the case. So extrapolating that ahead into the future is not a leap of faith. It's the most obvious, it's the most parsimonious conclusion. I got in a real heated argument with materialists about this. He said that he ridiculed me and thought, obviously they would ridicule this and say how ridiculous it is, but only if you've already taken for granted that the material world is all there is. If you've already accepted on faith, that, or not even on faith, I suppose, but it is there is a jump there, that this around us is real, that there are atoms and subatomic particles that actually somehow exist outside of experience. If you take that, and that is a leap of faith, compared to the Buddhist concept of simply believing in what is experienceable, like seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, feeling, thinking. This you can believe in because it's there. No matter what it is that I'm seeing, you can't deny that there's the experience that is somehow best labeled as seeing. You know, as a name, and it's an experience. You can't deny that there's some experience there. That's the most undeniable thing. Now, whether we're in the matrix hooked up to a machine, or a brain in a vat, or whether we're actually in a three-dimensional reality, I'm actually in this room, that is something that you can't answer, or it's less easy to answer, and it's more of a leap of faith. So materialists do that, and this is what's required to have this idea that when the physical body dies, because the visible body exists and because it's the cause of the mind, two things which you haven't proved, therefore death equals the end of existence, right? So you've actually taken leaps of faith there. Now, reincarnation doesn't require that. Reincarnation says what we experience now just continues, which is in every case the most parsimonious answer. So based on Occam's razor, the law that if it's more complicated without any need, you cut it off in favor of a more parsimonious answer or conclusion. So the most parsimonious is that what we experience now continues, and that's that there is no death. And so therefore the idea of rebirth, well, how that works, that's more theory, and that's really speculation. So the idea that the mind creates a new body and there's a new being, that we don't have proof of, but it's still in line with the most parsimonious because it's what we observe. So we have to put these two things together: what we observe in experiential level and what we see in others. Oh, that being was born there, seeming out of nothing. Then we have the idea that they were reborn, and that is just theory. But point being that once we meditate, even if we haven't become enlightened, and reincarnation actually isn't proven when someone becomes a sotapanna or when becomes an arahant even. You don't prove it there. But you understand it and you realize why it's so reasonable once you start to meditate, because you see how the mind works and how reality works. How reality really isn't based on the material world. It's based on experience. Once you see that, once you break through that and are able to just let go of all these views and ideas and beliefs and concepts and just see things as they're experienced, your whole paradigm shifts, and the idea of rebirth is just the most reasonable. It's just the most obvious answer. Right, so that took a while, so that's it actually. That's my last question for today. Still 48 questions to go. So we're never going to probably catch up, but that's good. It's good that there's always new questions and people can vote on them, and we'll just answer the ones that are always rising to the top. And we'll never get to the ones that are backlogged at the bottom. So thank you everyone for participating, and wishing you all a good night. Thank you. We had fewer viewers today, but I'm not advertising it, so I don't expect lots of people to actually watch this. What I expect is what we're seeing, that a lot of people are going to the videos because now I'm posting them individually. Each question gets a video. And for those of you who got my message, you can help me to categorize them. But I think it's actually easy for me to do as well, so I'm actually categorizing them as I'm uploading them now. The past week, as I've been uploading them, I've started to categorize the new videos. It's the older videos that need to be categorized because I'm not going to go through hundreds and hundreds of videos personally. So thank you everyone who's helped with that. I'm not going to give that link that allows you to edit the videos, because I think if it's too wide, then it just opens it up for abuse. But we'll see. Maybe in the future I'll enlist more people, but I think there's enough activity there already. And if you want to find out about how to do that, you can read my web blog. There's a link that allows you to actually edit the categorization, so you can add new videos and categorize them. So yeah, thank you for that, and I think that's the most useful resource that comes from this. So Good to see. We've got lots and lots of people. I can see on YouTube how many people are watching the videos, and it's like 5,000 a day, which is great. Wonderful. So thank you all for your interest and wishing you all the best. Next month I'm going to be away, going down to Florida, heading down the east coast of North America, all the way to Florida, stopping in 5 different places or 6 different places, something like that. And hopefully sharing the Dhamma and meeting people who I've already shared the Dhamma with, and just starting something new. It's just kind of an experiment, but it's something that I think will probably be continued in the future. Maybe next year I'll go down the west coast or something like that. Anyway, thank you all for tuning in. Wishing you all the best. Have a good day. Peace.